You're listening to Fox Cities Murder Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox Cities Murder Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, we are back again.
We are.
Where are we visiting today?
Appleton?
Nice.
Question mark?
I've been there before.
Yeah. So this is a history episode, and I gave this presentation a couple weeks ago at Kaukauna, and then I had people in Appleton ask me to give it, which I have not done yet, but I might give it again. And I plan on revising it yet again to turn into an article for a magazine. So this is like the second version of multiple versions of this. This is going to go through a lot more edits than the usual episode.
And it seems like it's a theme that people are digging, because if you're doing it 3, 4, 5 times over again, people obviously want to know this information.
People seem interested. We'll see if our listeners are interested. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. Doing it live, it was like 45 minutes. I'll see if I can be shorter than that. We're going to go all the way back to 1851. How do you feel about that? 1851, good year?
I feel really good about 1851.
Okay, so 1851 is the year that Outagamie County split off from Brown County. So, for people who don't know, it used to be Brown County was like all of northeast Wisconsin, and then the counties started splitting off. Outagamie became its own county in 1851. As part of that, when you become your own county, you need your own local government. They have elections. The elections, as far as I know, go just fine. And our man, Charles Greenough, is elected county treasurer.
Okay.
And Charles Greenough, I'm not going to go into super detail about that, but he's a translator for the federal government. He deals with native and government relations. He comes from a long line of fur traders and things like that. He's a very well-known man in the area.
And obviously everybody knows him most well because his house is a museum in Kaukauna.
Well, I don't know if people know that or not, but it's true. His house is a museum in Kaukauna.
That's how I know him, so I would assume most people would fall under that same category.
Yes. Well, so along comes another guy, and his name is Robert Morrow. Now, Robert Morrow is not local originally. He comes from out east. He comes to the Appleton area. He associates himself with the people from Lawrence University. I don't know if he came to Appleton because of Lawrence University, but those are the people he kind of hangs out with when he gets there. Lawrence University was in Appleton before there was an Appleton. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like the original reason there is an Appleton. And a lot of those guys were East Coast Protestants. They kind of wanted to do some reforming on the frontier. So he's part of that group. Come November 1852, 1 year later, and there are county elections again. Now here's where things are weird. There are conflicting state statutes. One state statute says the treasurer role is held for 2 years.
Okay.
The other statute says that elections are held on even years. Okay. So there was an election in 1851, even though it's not an even year, because it was the first time there was an Outagamie County. They needed to get some people in charge.
Okay.
So 1852 comes along, and now, because state statute says every even year, they have another one. This time, Robert Morrow is elected county treasurer.
Okay. I thought this was going to get way more confusing than that, but okay.
I'm going to try to not make this confusing. Robert Morrow, is along with like being involved with the Lawrence people, he also is actively involved in building plank roads. He gets people to invest in plank roads. Plank roads are kind of like the next step up from dirt roads. At this early point in time, from Appleton, you could get to Lake Winnebago and you could get to Kaukauna, but that was about it. So his like big project that he makes his living off of is he's building a plank road out to Stevens Point in Portage.
Now, is a plank road, do you know, is that like just
it's
laying
literally
down boards, slats?
Yes, it's literally boards.
Okay.
So that's what he's doing when he's not being treasurer. That immediately there's a dispute. So Morrow's like, hey, I won the election. I'm the treasurer. Yay. And Greeno's like, wait a second, but I'm supposed to be treasurer for 2 years, so I'm still the treasurer. So they both claim to be the treasurer. Initially, the county board puts forth a resolution, and they side with Morrow. They say, Morrow won the most recent election. He's the treasurer. If you've got taxes, pay your taxes to Morrow. It's all fine and good, but Greeno doesn't want to give it up that easily, so he continues to say that he is the rightful treasurer and is telling people he's the rightful treasurer. The county board has to start putting things in the newspaper saying, no, Morrow's the treasurer, pay things to Morrow, do not pay them to Greeno. They tell Greeno, they're like, if you knock this off right now, we're going to let it go. But if you keep this up, we're going to get the sheriff after you because you are wrongfully taking people's money. And that's not okay. So they tell him that. He doesn't really seem to care.
I like how you put that.
He continues at it. So for several months in early 1853, now that Morrow is supposed to be the treasurer, the county board posts an ad in the newspaper saying there's a card in the Appleton Crescent cautioning all persons against paying taxes to Robert Morrow. In our opinion, all acts properly belonging to the office of county treasurer can be legally performed by Robert Morrow, in whom this board has full confidence for integrity and ability, and that all persons who have taxes to pay in Outagamie County shall pay the same to Morrow. Sounds pretty settled. But every time this appears in the newspaper, immediately below it is a second ad, and this ad says, caution. It is said that Robert Morrow is pretending to act as treasurer of Outagamie County and to receive money in that capacity. Therefore, this is to caution all persons against making any payments to Morrow. Further information will be given at the county treasurer's office, which is at the corner of College Avenue and Garrison Streets upstairs. Signed, Charles Greeno, county treasurer. The office upstairs at the corner of College and Garrison is now Oneida. So if people want to kind of imagine, it's like a center of downtown. Is not the official treasurer's office.
It's like Charles Greeno's office.
Yeah, he's like rented out this space. So, you've got the county board, which should be official, but then immediately below that ad is another ad saying, absolutely do not pay this guy. Morrow's going full speed ahead. He considers himself the rightful treasurer, and I don't blame him. He won the election. The county board has him backed up. If the county says you're the county treasurer, I think you're the county treasurer.
You can't really argue that much, can you?
So part of what he does as treasurer, like the primary job of treasurer is to collect the taxes from the various cities and towns in your county. That's the primary job. But you can also auction off parcels of land if the people who own that land are delinquent. Like if they owe so much taxes that, they have to forfeit their land, that's something you can do.
Okay.
Morrow goes pretty hardcore on this.
Okay.
He's immediately, like after the board starts running these these ads saying he's the treasurer, you'll see long lists of parcels of land in the paper being auctioned off. I don't know if it's an unusually high number or not. Maybe it's perfectly normal, but it seems high to me. Like there's a lot of property being listed. He also runs his own personal ads saying, hey, the county treasurer's office is here. Stop on by. I've also got some goods for sale. If you're a Menominee who hasn't yet left the area, stop on by. I'll sell them to you cheap. Which maybe I'm reading too much into that, but the way I read it is really insulting. Because I read it as like, hey, Menominee, you're not supposed to be here anymore. We kind of pushed you out. But if you haven't left yet, pick up some cheap goods on your way. Maybe that's not his intent, but that's how I read it. So it's not going to be that simple. This story wouldn't be quite a story if it were that simple. They're both going to continue to act like the treasurer throughout all of 1853. And of course, what happens when people don't agree is they start filing lawsuits. So Charles Greenough files lawsuits. Robert Morrow, with the backing of the county, files lawsuits. They go back and forth. They stack up. Like there's a bunch of these for all kinds of minutia. Like every time something doesn't quite go one of their ways, they file another lawsuit. So these like stack up.
I can't believe this would go on this long because it seems like this should be pretty open and shut.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this Morrow guy is obviously the county treasurer.
I agree. I would absolutely read it that way myself. But Greenough is suing, and he's using the statute saying that treasurer is good for 2 years, and he's like, I had no obligation to step down after my first year because my job was for 2 years. He's not wrong either. So they both can point to the law as being correct. So I still feel once the county board says you're the guy, you're the guy. But Greenough's not pulling this completely out of nowhere. Like he's got a law he's standing on here.
Yeah, and at least, yeah, right, exactly. At least he has a legitimate reason for his gripe.
Yeah. Now, what makes this really fun from a historical perspective, and I don't have most of that in my notes, this will be in the notes later on, is while these lawsuits are going back and forth, the newspaper has an editorial section like newspapers often do. And people write letters, and they're long letters, and they're really insulting. And so the Appleton Crescent, at this time there was an Appleton Post and an Appleton Crescent. They later merged, but at this time the Appleton Crescent is run by a man named Sam Ryan, who is a friend of Greenough's. So his paper kind of sides with Greenough in this fight, which gives him a bit of an edge, even though I still think he's kind of on the shorter end of this. And editorials are run and letters are run, and they're saying like the board is making decisions at like 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to sneak things through on how they're doing business with the treasurer's office. And they're making all these accusations. And the language, I wish I had it in the notes here. And I'm sorry for the listeners that I don't, because the way they insult each other is amazing. Instead of saying, this person is an idiot, or this person is a crook, they'll take an entire paragraph to say that, and they'll say it in such flowery language where it doesn't sound like they're saying, you're stupid. It sounds like, you are lacking in the fineries of skills available to the intellect, this really fancy way of saying things. So it sounds like they're real gentlemen about it. Even though if you read through what they're actually saying, they're just being total
So they're doing exactly what they do now. But they're just being way nicer about it, basically.
100%. Yeah. It's the political rhetoric is no better then than it is now. They just have nicer, more refined language when they're doing it in public. So, but the meaning is identical. Like, they're not being really any nicer. They're just like, check out my fancy words. So this is going on all throughout 1853. The lawsuits are going on. In the fall of 1853, another election is held. And now this one is like the most questionable election of all, because it's held in case Greeno happens to be correct. If he was correct, it's time for an election. If he's wrong, there isn't an election.
Oh my God, so are we going to have a third person being entered into this equation?
No, it's not
good.
It's not that crazy. It's not that crazy. But they do one in the fall of 1853. Greeno and Morrow have another rematch. Greeno wins, like, decidedly. I mean, huge majority.
God, the county must have been like, crap. This is the last thing we need it now.
Which is true, because if Morrow had won that would settle the matter.
Yeah.
But now Greeno has won by a lot. So, I don't know. But the people, the canvassers, the people who like tally up and process that, like, they printed it in the paper, but they're like, we're not even going to report this to the state. We're just going to hold on to these results and wait for the courts to figure this out. Like, so for now, this is not official. We did it. This is what happened, but we're not going to turn it in. We're not going to certify it with the state. Late in 1853, so the election's in November. After the November election, the courts actually do decide in Greeno's favor. And they say, okay, you are the legal treasurer. So this now gives Greeno some more standing. Morrow, of course, appeals this decision. He doesn't want it to go like that. So now at this point, the town treasurers don't know what to do. And the newspapers start, when they print the county offices, they actually print both of their names. They'll print like sheriff, coroner, and then they'll print both of their names and write acting treasurer next to them. So at this point, they're not even like going to try to say one person's right. They're just going to both be like, yeah, pay whoever you want. It's weird. But after the court decides in Greeno's favor, even though there's now an appeal on that, Greeno runs an ad, and he claims that Morrow, quote, absconded with the greater part of the records of the treasurer's office, and we put out a search warrant but could not find him. We believe that he was last seen in Oshkosh and was believed to be heading to Madison or Milwaukee. Anybody who finds Morrow will be liberally rewarded. So Greeno's now putting up this claim that Morrow, after losing the court case, has fled the state and he's got the treasurer's books with him. This is not true. This did not happen.
Wow.
But that's what he claims. So he wants people to like hunt Morrow down and to get the books turned over.
This is insane.
It's pretty weird. It's unrelated to this, but it'll play into this in a bit. In 1854, so now we're going into 1854. Currently, the courts are in Greeno's favor, but there's still an appeal out there. A federal act called the Kansas-Nebraska Act is passed, and it creates the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. This is intended to open up new lands for the Transcontinental Railroad, because it's weird, whereas right now, in this time, Kansas and Nebraska are not really U.S. territory. I mean, they are in a vague sense, but they're not really established. Mm-hmm. Whereas California is.
Okay.
So there's like this no man's land between the East Coast and California. So they're like, okay, we got to start building up Nebraska and Kansas if we want to get the railroads all the way through. So they do that. What this does is it creates this really bad situation where now people are flooding into Kansas fast as they can because the issue of slavery is coming to a head. This is the 1850s, before the Civil War, and they're like, whether they want Kansas to be a free state or a slave state, they flood into Kansas because they're like, well, whoever has the most people here when we vote on slavery, that's what Kansas will be.
Interesting.
So it becomes this major problem where Kansas has an influx of settlers, and the settlers fundamentally hate each other. They're also coming in, and this is supposed to be largely Indian territory, and they start squatting and setting up small towns where they're not supposed to. They're setting it up on tribal land. The natives don't like that for obvious reasons. The federal government also doesn't like it. The federal government, despite how poorly they treat the natives, they still don't want whites to be settling on Indian land.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of not related to any of this, but the problem with that is if you squat on federal Indian land, the federal government doesn't like that. But if a fight breaks out, like a little skirmish or battle breaks out, the military is going to side with the Americans and not the Indians, even though they don't agree with them. So it's this weird situation where they're like, you're not supposed to be there, but if whites get attacked, we're going to come in and defend them. Yeah. So this will come into play. Just hold that thought on that one. So by the fall of 1854, it's made its way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Things have kind of gone back and forth. There's different courts kind of seeing different sides of this argument. They see valid points on both sides. Ultimately, the Supreme Court sends it back down to the local court to make a final determination on certain things. And it goes before a local judge named Judge Johnson. It is not good. Judge Johnson clearly sides with Greeno. He says, I think Morrow should be arrested. I think his books and papers should be seized. All of this. And when Morrow hears this, he's like, okay, I don't like this anymore. So he gets up and he leaves and he goes to Kansas. The courts have now, sort of back decided that Greeno was the rightful treasurer for the years 1852, 1853. They're like, you were the guy. The Appleton Crescent newspaper, run by his friend Sam Ryan, cheers this on. He goes, this is all very sarcastic. We were so fortunate to have two county treasurers, but I guess it would be okay to have just one. It'll be better for our budget. So Morrow's now left. He's gone to Kansas. And I should point out that there is a strong connection between Appleton, Wisconsin, and Kansas. Mm-hmm. The same people who started Lawrence University are some of the same people who moved to Kansas. Specifically, they moved to a city called Lawrence, Kansas. You knew this.
Well, we talked about this on the Lawrence episode.
Okay, so you knew this. Yeah. So Lawrence, Kansas is named that because it's founded by the same people who started Lawrence University. And so a lot of the same people moved there. The first mayor of Lawrence, Kansas is James Blood, who I believe is a brother to Henry Blood. Henry Blood related to Kate Blood, all these names that you may have heard from early Appleton history. So it's all going fine and good. Now the county has to go back and go over the books, and they have to kind of clear this up. They have to take the last couple of years where there were two books, get them back down into one book. And there's discrepancies. Things aren't quite right. There's definitely money missing.
Okay.
And it's trying to determine why is it missing? Because the people who are paying the treasurer, it's not necessarily their fault. You know, maybe they didn't pay, but if they didn't pay, it's because they didn't know who to pay. Or if they did pay, who did they pay? Mm-hmm. And now we got to figure out, because if a certain person is supposed to have paid, but they're not on Greenow's books, it doesn't mean they didn't pay. Maybe they're on Morrow's books. So the county has to now kind of figure this all out. It becomes a problem in multiple ways. One, because they end up being thousands of dollars short, and thousands of dollars in the 1850s is a lot of money. That's not good. They're also supposed to be turning over some of this money to the state. So the municipalities pay the county pays the state. Now the state is saying that they're getting shorted money. The state doesn't like that. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem. Also, there's another major problem here.
Okay.
If you can remember back to the beginning of this episode, I said that when Morrow became treasurer, I felt, and I don't know this, I'm not an expert, but I felt he was kind of aggressively auctioning off parcels of land.
Yep.
Well, now that it turns out for those 2 years he was not treasurer legally, the county has to go back
and tell them that they don't actually own that land?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Every auction that Morrow did is not a legal auction anymore.
What a nightmare.
So all these people who had their farms auctioned off can now claim their farms back because they had no legal right to take them from them.
But now what happens with where does the money come from?
I
guess the state or the county would pay them back?
I would guess so. It's a huge mess. There's somehow still legal stuff going on at this point. Even though Morrow has fled to Kansas, there's still some things that are kind of wrapping up. And Morrow is also now sued by people for breach of contract because he had been paid thousands of dollars to build plank roads. And he left. So there's roads that didn't ever end up getting finished. So he's being sued for breach of contract for these half-finished highways. So stuff is continuing on. It's a real mess. There's a few fun things here. One, there's a letter, and again, I don't have it in my notes here. I will have it on the notes online once they get online. And Morrow writes a lengthy letter to the Crescent, the Appleton Crescent. Now, at no point in time do I ever see Greenough writing anything other than these very short ads, saying, bring your money to this office. You never see like a long thing in his own voice. The strongest defender are these editorials in the newspaper, and they're just signed P. Most of them are signed, but the ones really defending him are signed P.
Do we have any speculation on who P could be?
I personally don't, but there was someone who responded to P who thought that it was Frederick Packard, who was an early attorney. Now, for people who are familiar with Appleton, which I'm going to guess is a lot of people because this is Fox Cities podcast, Packard was one of Greenow's attorneys. His other attorney is another name that should sound familiar to people, which was Anson Ballard. So if you've ever heard the names Packard or Ballard in Appleton, these are these two founding attorneys of Appleton, and they had Greenow's back. So yeah, there was even insinuations that Greenough wasn't even the guy doing any of this, that these lawyers were basically using him as their front guy. have any opinion on that one way or the other. Like, I don't know. I assume that he cared. There was a one point during this whole mess where Greeno also runs like a very brief letter. And he claims, I assume this to be true, he claims that he was offered the chairman position for the town of Kaukauna. And he writes in this very brief thing, "Thank you for your thoughts of making me chairman of town of Kaukauna. I have to decline because I'm treasurer of Outagamie County and I can't hold 2 offices at once." And what I'm amused by with that is the only reason I can imagine that he put that in there was just for him to say, "Hey, I'm the treasurer," at a time when it was still kind of in dispute. You know, because that would have been a good out for him. He could have been like, "Oh, I'm sick of this legal fight. I'm going to duck out and just be the chairman of town of Kaukauna." But he doesn't do that. So I feel like Greeno's somewhat invested in this. I don't think it's just his attorneys backing him up. Morrow and James Blood, along with a number of other people, have left Appleton for Kansas. And in addition to all these other legal problems, guess what? They now become delinquent on their taxes in Appleton. So we now see Greeno posting ads auctioning off their property. So now it's like the reverse. Instead of Morrow auctioning off people's property, now Morrow's property gets auctioned off. And it's really good property. It's what was then called Lawsburg, which is like right in the Lawrence University area. So it's prime real estate. So they auction that off. Morrow does 2 final things. One, like I said, he writes this lengthy letter and just blasts everybody. At this point, he's done with Appleton. He's out. So he just blasts everybody. He basically says the final judge who made the decision was illiterate. I don't think that might be the exact word he used, but he basically says that this person has no concept of reading or how the law works, and really just insulting. And then finally, after all these problems, he files a bill with the Outagamie County asking to be reimbursed for any legal expenses he had, because at the time that he had legal expenses, he was believed to be the rightful county treasurer. And the county basically is like, no.
Really?
Now, I think technically that was a fair claim. But at this point, they're so sick of this mess because they're like, thousands of dollars are missing. Trying to get the books back from them was a pain. And they're like, after all this, you're going to ask us to cover your legal fees? Like, no. So they refuse to do it. So Greeno is now, after all these problems, the treasurer. Morrow goes on to be pretty notable in Kansas. There are these big skirmishes, big fights in Kansas, what's called Bleeding Kansas, and kind of sort of is the spark of the Civil War, because Kansas has these fights to see whether it's going to be a free state or a slave state. There's even lots of suspicious things going on where, like, before the elections, they do a tally to see how many people can legally vote. And then when the vote happens, the thousands of extra people voted than there was people that were eligible to vote. And it's apparently people from Missouri had like spilled over the night before just to show up and vote. Lawrence gets basically burned down and rebuilt at one point. From
Lawrence,
the city, from people coming in and like arsoning it, trying to get these anti-slavery people out of there.
Wow.
So it's this whole huge mess. But he goes on to be a pretty notable politician in Kansas after the Civil War and does all right for himself. So he's not probably happily remembered in Appleton, but he goes on to be a real hero in Kansas.
But now, based on that story, unless I missed anything, he never theoretically did anything wrong. This was
think so.
This was all just like poorly written laws, basically, right?
I think that's correct. I think this comes down to you had two conflicting laws. They weren't very clearly worked out, and you also had strong personalities. I don't think that he personally did anything really wrong. There's definitely some question about his books being not the greatest, but there's no evidence that it was him like purposely like pocketing money or anything.
Yeah, and it wasn't really, I mean, it was a matter of just converging the books together. It wasn't so much, at no point did it seem like his books were off. It's just that for that year there was two sets of books, which just made everything a pain in the butt.
There was finally, like I say, a shortage, and they tended to blame him rather than Greeno for that shortage. I don't know the reality of that. As I say, like, a lot of this is personalities. By which I mean, there's clearly seems to be, like, these two groups. One is, like, the old settlers group, which is, like, Greeno, Ballard, Packard, and the guys who, you know, had been in Wisconsin for a long time, you know, relatively speaking, for how young Wisconsin is at this point. And then you've got the new group of people who come in and set up Lawrence University, and they're like the East Coast, you know, right-thinking, religious type people. And they're not necessarily like enemies. Politically, they agree for the most part. Mm-hmm. But they seem to have such strong differences in numerous areas that they kind of form these two rival groups. And so when the Greeno-sided group is stronger politically, Morrow's just getting crapped on right and left.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. And the other part I love about this story is it goes to show, because all of this stems from that, I mean, problems with in-laws, the way laws were written. And just to bring the listeners back, if you don't remember this now, and tell me if I got this wrong, but basically what the problem was one law said that the treasurer was supposed to be there for 2 years. The other one said that the election was supposed to happen on an even year. Mm-hmm. And this county came into existence in an odd year, which threw everything off.
Correct.
And I just find that comical how something as minute as that in a law can screw everything up and cause this huge, massive problem.
Yeah, what should have been done here was they should have been very clear at the beginning that this is going to be a special election. You know, this is a placeholder. This is not going to be the real election. We just need someone to sit in the seat for a year. But apparently they weren't very clear about that. And they handled it as though it were a full real election, which, yes, that is what really seems to have kicked this off, is that treasurer, and I presume other offices as well, are supposed to be 2 years, but then at the same time, elections are held in even years. I mean, as they generally still are today. They're generally held in the even years. So, yeah, there should have been some clarification on this before they ever had the election, but I guess they didn't. So.
Yeah, and it's just mind-blowing that something so small in a law can cause this.
Yeah,
because and it's not like
it's small, but it's big in this case.
Yeah, right, and it's not like it's something where you're like, oh my god, how did they screw that up? Maybe you look at it from that perspective, but I'm like, I can see how one law would be written this way and one law would be written that way, and they would never even realize it, and then it would.
I don't even blame the law for this. I blame that whoever was setting up the elections in Outagamie County should have made this more clear about what they were doing.
Right, but you could see how you would miss that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it would be super easy to just overlook that thing.
Well,
so.
Yeah, and so I should point out for people who are like not super familiar with Wisconsin history, which I shouldn't assume anybody is. This is 1851. Wisconsin became a state in 1848. So keep this in mind. Like, the laws have only existed for 3 years. Nobody has really been doing a whole lot of anything. You know, there was territories before that, Wisconsin Territory and Michigan Territory and all that. But actual official statehood was only 3 years old. So this is all new to everybody. Like nobody here is like the expert. And even the Wisconsin Supreme Court, there was no Wisconsin Supreme Court
at this time
originally. By the time it got to the Supreme Court, there was.
Okay.
But for the first couple of years of Wisconsin statehood, there was no Wisconsin Supreme Court. So
they were probably like, oh crap, how do we resolve this, right?
Yeah. So like even the Supreme Court justices, like they weren't even there since 1848. They were there even shorter because they had only just gotten in to the Supreme Court, because prior to there actually being a designated court, the system was set up where there would be like a rotating panel of regional judges that would kind of decide cases. There wasn't a firm like you're a Supreme Court justice.
So they at least had a system.
They had a system. They had a system, but it wasn't designated where you were specifically on the Supreme Court. It would rotate to different areas of the state, and there would be a little panel that would switch. So they had a system, but like the idea that we have today of how a Supreme Court works was not a thing when Wisconsin first started. So this was all new territory. Like nothing here, like even the simplest laws, nothing was on the books yet. There was no court history of how things worked out. So.
Yeah, and everything was untested, so they didn't really know how it was gonna. They had to work out the kinks.
Yeah. So. Now, I mean, things that even if they don't make sense, you can at least point to like 50 court cases and be like, "This is why it is the way it is."
Right.
They had nothing to point to.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. That is a good history story, Gavin. No murder, no mayhem, but
no murder.
Still...
No. I think that it's mayhem, sort of.
Yeah, I could see the mayhem. Yeah,
I definitely feel like there was some chaos going on there, but yeah, no murder. Nobody, as far as I know, nobody died because of it. But it was not great.
So, do you got anything else with this one, or should we wrap her up?
We can wrap it up. Like I said, this is the second version now that I've done. I'm going to continue to add to it, revise it, that sort of thing. So who knows? The story itself won't change, but it's going to get continually polished a few more times. So if something happens with it and it does get published, I'll let people... It will go on the website either way. But I'm in conversation with a magazine to publish it. So it could get like a real publisher. As well
as you thinking possibly sometime in Appleton you might be doing the presentation. Again.
So, okay. So as we record this, a week or two ago, I don't know how time works. A week or two ago, I gave a presentation at the Appleton Historical Society on Fox Cities Murder Mayhem.
Yeah, I know. I had it on my calendar to go to, and then I just got lazy and said no. I'm just going home.
It was great. The museum is fantastic. If you're in the Appleton area, check out their museum. It is great. I said this to them, and I'll say it on here, and I apologize to the people at the Houdini Museum. I love you. Dr. Dustin Mack, you're amazing. But I think the Appleton Historical Museum might even be better.
So where is the Appleton Historical Museum? When I saw that, I assumed that it was just the castle, but that's not the castle.
It is not. They have their own thing. It's in an old... Okay, I'm gonna. Do you know what Mongo's used to be?
The Rondos or Mongo?
Mongos.
Like like the hoo-ha type grill place? Yeah.
Well, the place, and it was inside an old funeral home.
Okay, yeah.
That's where it is.
Okay. So it's in that building.
So it's in downtown Appleton. It's not on College Avenue. It's like a block or two off of College Avenue.
Yeah, it's kind of I would say, kind of close to the library.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty close to the library. So
anyway, so I was there doing a presentation, and it kind of came up in conversation. They were like, that'd be a really good story to come back and do. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But the conversation did happen. So, yeah, it could happen. But either way, I'll gladly give a shout out to that place because I was super impressed. The place is beautiful. Their collections are amazing. Absolutely worth checking out.
Awesome. All right, then we will wrap this episode up. We want to thank everybody for their continued support of this podcast, and we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.